Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking. And I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight is part 2 of our interview with Bryn Blankinship. Bryn is an expert in the field of past life and life between lives spiritual regression. In part 1 of our interview, Bryn took us through the past life process. Tonight, she'll talk all about life between lives, that period of time when our soul is in between incarnations. Along with being an expert in the field of spiritual regression, Bryn is also a contributing author to 2 popular books on the subject of past lives and between lives. Her work, entitled Embracing Equality, is featured in Brian Weiss's latest release, Miracles Happen, and in Michael Newton's revealing book, Memories of the Afterlife. Bryn has Chapter 3, When Children Teach from the Grave. Along with being a certified hypnosis instructor, Bryn is also an international lead instructor for the Michael Newton Institute, where she served for 7 years on the board as Vice President and Director of Membership. Bryn keeps a busy practice in Wilmington, North Carolina, seeing clients and teaching hypnosis and past life regression courses to an international student base. She founded Hypnotic Solutions Hypnosis Center as a holistic center assisting clients with their personal growth and transformation. Bryn can be contacted at her website, www.brynblankinship.com. And my first question to Bryn was, what is the difference between past lives and life between lives? Let's take a listen.
All right, so we've talked about past lives before. The thing is that people do ask, what's the difference between a past life and an LBL, which is a life between lives type session? Now, a past life goes into your soul's history during a single incarnation, and you could visit several of your single incarnations and find out about that life, why you lived, what happened, and then you go to the between at the end of that life. At the death scene, you go to the between. Now, in an LBL session, you go into the between and spend most of the session in that time looking at themes. Why you're experiencing something that's happening in your life now, how many lifetimes you've been working on that same experience, what you've learned, what kind of themes, so you might have a series of lifetimes that you can explore from the spirit world and find out more about what you experienced in several along the same line instead of a single individual session.
So when that happens, Bryn, is there one stop, or does the soul visit other areas or other stops or other places within the spirit world?
In the spirit world, a couple of different things can happen. With Michael Newton's work, Michael Newton coined the phrase life between lives, and his works documented a lot of the things that happen there. There are many station stops, we call them. There are soul groups, places of recreation, meeting with your guides and elders, council of elders. There are those kinds of places that a soul may visit. And then sometimes a soul, they're in the spirit world, but they may just visit one space and find out information about all of those places. So it gets a little confusing sometimes for people that, haven't experienced it yet, because it gets confused with past lives. There are just so many things out there that seem to confuse matters about what LBL is, if that makes sense. And no. LBL is the acronym for Life Between Lives, hypnotherapy.
So it's a soul's existence in between incarnations in the spirit world. And within the spirit world, we have, I guess like in any other existence here on Earth, we have places we can go, places we can learn, places where we can have entertainment or leisure. We have our guides, we have our soul groups, and then we have our council of elders. So maybe what we should do, Bryn, is start from how we get into an LBL, what leads into it. As an example, I know with the Newton approach that a past life session is required first.
Yes. So with the past life, if someone called me up and said, hey, I'd love to experience a life between lives session, what do I need to do? The first thing I would suggest to them is to come in for a past life session, because the past life session is going to get them prepared to go into that deeper state. One of the very first things I say is I'm not a psychic. I am not reading you. You're going into that deeper state and you're basically reading yourself. The information is going to come through you. So you're participating in this. They need to understand that they have to relax. They have to tune into that higher consciousness that's within them. It's not something I can do for them, but I'm going to guide them through it. And then we're going to go through a past life and explore that. It gets them used to working with me. It gets them used to tapping into the deeper part of themselves. We explore the past life. We find out about not only about the past life, but we find out about lessons learned, why they lived the life they lived, some of the people in that life. And it also helps me to understand how they process. Because some people are very visual, and that's great. You get a visual person, they go under, they see the whole experience. That's going to be helpful for what we're going to do with the Life Between Lives experience. If somebody is kinesthetic, that's great too, because that's somebody, they may not see it, but when you're asking about the situation, they're able to describe it in great detail. They can describe it in great detail, not because they're seeing it, but because they're feeling the emotional life of it. And so that's great. And then some people are more fluid with this right from the start than others, because some people are just more used to working that way. They're just more creative in their thought processes, or some are very analytical, and it takes them a little while to just get used to tuning in this way, working with another person, like me, to facilitate it. And that helps prepare them for the next session that we're going to do, which is the Life Between Lives session. So if somebody's coming in from out of town, I try to set it up because they're coming a great distance to be there. I make sure they're ready, that this is, they understand the process and they're ready to do this. If they feel like they need to wait a little while, we'll put it off a bit. But when they come in, we'll do the past life. We go back to the hotel, go home, come back the next day. We'll do the Life Between Lives session. And that's a much longer session. It's 4 or 5 hours. In that session, we're still going to do a past life, because that's the best way to get them there. So we're going to start with age regression through current life to childhood, into the womb. It's a great opportunity for exploration in the womb as to why we're here, why we're being born this time, how we feel about being born this time. We're going to leave the womb and cross into the past life and go through the past life pretty quickly, just to hit a couple of highlights. But the main purpose is to get to the death scene, to the crossover into the spirit world, because there we're going to ask all our questions. There we're going to find out more, about their life's purpose, what they've come in this life to do. We're going to talk with their guides. We're going to talk to the Council of Elders, let them explore more about how they're doing with the Council of Elders. When you're doing an LBL, what's so awesome about this is that you're accessing soul level information regarding your immortal existence. This is your soul that continues through all its twists and turns of all the lives that you've ever lived, and it's back home. So it has that vision, that overview of all of its lifetimes, that it can access information regarding that.
So it's not a physical experience or a physical incarnation type of experience, which is what a past life really focuses on. What you're saying is this is the soul's existence. This is the non-physical realm.
This is non-physical between all of the lifetimes. It's pure soul state, soul essence, but it's its natural personality. It's your soul personality that you're accessing, not the human personality that you have when you come in. This time I came in as Bryn Blankinship. Another time I was a male or some other female or some other person with those other names. So you had the personality of that body, that human body that you were with, in addition to your soul's influence meshed in with it as well.
So it sounds like, Bryn, it's a 2-part process for the LBL. I'll kind of simplify this. There's day 1, and the first session on day 1 is a past life, and that's a prerequisite. Yes. That's what I'm understanding.
Yes.
And then day 2 would be the LBL session, which includes an abbreviated past life session to be able to take the client from that past life death scene into the spirit world, which then becomes the Between Lives part of the session.
Yes. Now, if someone has an unsuccessful past life session, then we're going to need to explore that. We're going to need to do the past life the next time they come in, whether the next day or down the road. We're going to need to do that past life session and get them through that before we can do the LBL, because it's opening their mind to the process. It's opening up their ability to access that information, and it's going to help them get so much more from the LBL experience. So you have to achieve that step, so to speak, but most people do. I leave it up to Spirit. Spirit sends me the right people at the right time, and they get what they need.
So if a client blocks on the first session, the past life session, on day two, again, I'm using a very simplified approach here, you
Mhm.
would not try the LBL session. You would say, hey, no, we've got to go back and complete this past life. Is that how you work it?
I take it as an individual situation with each person,
Okay.
but I want them to have achieved the past life. So actually, I just had this happen recently. So we had a person do the past life session, and she was grieving the loss of her daughter. If it's a grief type session, there needs to be some time between the event and when the person's coming in, just because there's so much that they're processing. So she came to me, and she's not used to doing past lives. She wanted to experience it. So we worked with the past life session, but there was difficulty. She was getting glimpses. She was actually getting information, but what would happen is before she would say it out loud, she would analyze what she was getting and then just give me little bits and pieces of it. And then as I prompted her a little bit more, I would get more and more information from her, but it took a lot of prodding to get it out of her. She wanted to analyze it as it was coming instead of letting it just come out, and then the story would start to make sense. And she was nervous and just, all of that. And an analytical woman as well. So we did the session, and we were going to do the LBL session the next day. So I said, look, you're already here. We've got the time blocked off. She said she wanted to do it. Let's just do the best we can. Let's see what happens. We're going to spend more time in the past life, but it would be nice if we could get beyond the past life and into the LBL. So we'll just approach it that way. We got the time. We'll see what happens. And the other thing was she was analyzing her past life to decide if she thought it was a good one or a bad one. If all the bells and whistles were going off and this was like an off the charts past life, or if it's just mundane. She said, I didn't want to bore you with what I was getting. So I was trying to analyze what was coming through. I said, I do this every day. There are no boring past lives to me. I'm on the edge of my seat, whether you're a shopkeeper or you're the King of England. I'm going to be just as excited as I'm helping facilitate the session. So don't worry about that. So she came in the next day and she said, I just decided I'm going to let myself relax and we're going to see what happens. So that day we went into the past life. She got to the death scene and she went into the spirit world, and her session was a little different than most. Her guide came and held her, just held her. And she had a list of questions she had wanted answered about her daughter. I believe another family member came by and just held her hand for a second. And the guides just held her for a very long time. And she started crying. And she said, I don't know why I'm crying, because I'm not sad. I don't know where the tears are coming from. And they downloaded some information to her that she was not able to share back with me. So I just let them do their job. And the guide was giving her a download of information. So I was just quiet for a bit and I let the guide do that. She wasn't able to verbalize to me a lot of what she was getting, but it was important that she get it. And then the tears started flowing. And so then, she had hoped that she would have a visit from her daughter. Her daughter was about 30 when she passed. But like I said, this had happened recently. There was a feeling or a sensation that her daughter was there briefly, but it wasn't like a visit. She had a list of questions that were not answered because that is not what she needed. So we finished out the session. It was great because it really was a long session. It was a full session, despite the fact that the day before she had had the difficulty, because she had just gotten used to the flow. She had gotten used to just letting it be what it was instead of trying to make it fit what she had read in the books. And it just made a much better session. So she left, and a few days later, I got an email from her, and she had come on the interstate to get here because that's the shortest route. She said, when I plugged my home address into my GPS, it took me down a 2-lane highway, which is not the same way that I came. But I decided I would just take that route because there was a reason that I was being led that way. So she said, I was just driving down the road. I didn't have the radio on. It was quiet. And then she put some CDs in that she had had in her car for years and years and years. She had forgotten what was even on them. And they had messages for her about death and dying and how the life goes on. We reincarnate. There's no sense crying at the grave because I've moved on to the space I need to be. I'll see you when I get there. And there were messages about strength of the angels being with you. That was just so relevant because her guides were still talking to her after the session and the connection was there. So now she's noticing things in a very real way. It just gave her a lot of comfort having the session. So even though she didn't get that list of questions answered with the who's and the whys of what happened to her daughter, she got the comfort and the peace that she needed.
So she got what she needed out of it.
She got what she needed. She just didn't get what she expected.
Now, Bryn, let me ask a question. Do a lot of clients come in asking or inquiring about whether they'll be able to see relatives who have passed? Does it work that way, or is that an expectation that they should have, shouldn't have? Does it get in the way?
Expectation gets in the way. You know, it's great that people have read Michael Newton's books, but sometimes people read the books and then they want to make their session be like what they've read. And they need to understand that the people who have their stories written up as case studies in the books didn't have that expectation. They just allowed themselves to have the session. And that's what the session unfolded into. So you're going to get the session that you need, and it's going to be beautiful if you allow it to just be what it is instead of trying to make it conform to something that you've read or something that you think it's supposed to be. Now, people that are grieving, or they do miss a loved one, maybe it's not a murder, but they're grieving the loss of someone that has just been gone from their life for a while. They are hoping that they'll have that contact with the loved one, and it does happen. It's just that I can't promise. If they said, I need you to guarantee that I'm going to be able to connect with my mother who passed years ago, I can't guarantee that.
Well, that's my question. What I was wondering was, if they contact you and say, look, my mother passed and my father passed, I want to come in and do a life between lives so I can connect with them. In other words, the sole purpose of doing the life between lives is to connect with a relative who is deceased and has passed. Is that something that you tell them, yeah, come on in, or do you say to them, like, hold on a second, we've got to talk a little bit?
I would say, hold on a second, we need to talk about that. It is possible that can happen, and it happens often. I just can't guarantee that it will. If you want to come in and we'll explore and see what comes up, we can certainly ask for that. And if it's supposed to happen, it will. This is something that we leave it to spirit. We put you in that space, we guide you and ask questions, but we can't guarantee how it's going to go.
But does that expectation create sometimes an issue with the client being able to navigate and get where they need to be in order to get into the past life or the LBL?
Yes. The expectation gets in the way because it puts someone into their analytical mind. Mm-hmm. It's trying to force something to come that it probably would come if they would just allow it, if they would just back off and allow it to come through.
So what would you tell a client then as far as what they should come in with? In other words, what level of expectation should they have? How should they prepare coming into the session?
To have the best session, you need to come with an open mind. That's what I tell them. They need to relax, come in with an open mind. Some people are nervous about having the session. They're nervous about, can I do this? I've never done anything like this before. What's it going to be like? There's the expectation they want it to be like what's in the books. There's the expectation that they want to meet certain people. I have to see my ex-husband when I have the session, or I have to see my grandmother. We can't guarantee any of that. But if they come with an open mind, they can access the information and they won't block themselves from it. Because what they're doing is they're actually blocking themselves from getting the experience. There can be guide blocking. The guide can come in and say, no, you don't need to know that for now, or, that's not something for you to know. But often the clients block themselves from that expectation or that anticipation.
And their experience, their way of experiencing it, I should say, their sensory perceptions. You mentioned before, you touched on it. It's
Mm-hmm.
everything, right? It comes in. It's that kinesthetic. It's that sense of knowing. It could be visual. Do you see a pattern as to how that experience materializes? I mean, does it start with a sense of knowing or kinesthetic and then lead to visual, or do some people just start with visual and
It depends on how a person's wired. I think we're getting more kinesthetic people these days than Michael Newton did, because I think people are wired a little differently than they were 40 years ago, 30 years ago, because we have more knowledge about people that are kinesthetic, and they tend to not talk about that in some of the early books. More, it seemed more visual. But as they're having the session, more of their senses start to open up and tune in. Now, we're speaking about visual and we're speaking about kinesthetic, but I've even had people where the sense of smell has come in. And so I was asking, okay, what's happening? We're in the we're crossing over into the past life, and I said, okay, tune in, tell me what you're noticing. And they're saying I'm not getting anything. And I'm saying, well, nothing is really something. Tell me more about that. Well, all I'm getting is this smell, and I'm floating a bit, but I'm getting this smell. And I had someone who that smell carried them through time, and all of a sudden it dropped them into a little Swiss village, and then they started to see. So they were getting a little bit of visual, a little bit of smell. The smell led them to the bakery. Oh, by the way, it was a pastry smell, a specific pastry smell that they were able to describe. Their other senses kicked in, started to open up, and they went into this Swiss bakery. The female that was laying in my chair was a male in the past life, and it turned out that he owned the bakery, and they were having a town meeting to explore more about all the young men had gone off to war, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to run their town without, some of the people that had lived there, some of the young men. All of that came off of a smell.
when they're in the between lives experience, what's the typical experience like? Is it visual, or is it the same thing as a past life where it could be smell, it could be kinesthetic feelings,
It,
emotions?
it can be both. It can be visual or it can be kinesthetic with feelings. But as they're getting into the LBL space, even more of their senses are opening up. So they will definitely feel. They will, because they'll feel the energy of the guides touching them, like that download of energy. They'll see beautiful lights and colors. Now, the smell, that's kind of a unique thing, but sometimes they'll talk about the smell of fresh flowers, jasmine, beautiful scents in the air, perfumey smells. I've had a few clients where I was speaking a minute ago about crossing over and that smell carried them, but it's more so visual and kinesthetic. And then I would say smell is like a secondary or, a little bit further down the line, but it does kick in at different times. Actually, though, now that I'm saying that, there's sometimes someone will have the scent of a loved one. They'll smell the perfume of someone who's crossed, and they'll know immediately who that was because the scent of their cologne or their perfume will come to them. We're talking about not having expectation. When they don't have the expectation, it can come in the way it needs to come. And so the guides send it through senses of smell, touch, taste, sight. It comes that way because they're open, not because they're trying to make it come a certain way.
Now, Bryn, in the first radio show, in the first part of the interview, we talked about the client having to be in a very deep state of hypnosis, deep state of trance.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it has to be even deeper for a between life session.
With a Life Between Lives session, we are taking them deeper than they've ever been before. Now, the past life is deep, but we're going in a layer even deeper to access that. And that's why the clients are able to access some of the soul level information that they get, that not all past life clients get. Because I have some people that they are just coming in for a past life. They don't even know about LBL, and that's all they want is a past life session. They get good information. They have good sessions. They may or may not have read books about that, But when someone comes in for an LBL session, and those clients may have just heard about LBL, still may or may not have read the books, it doesn't seem to matter. They still get the same kinds of experiences, and they're going deep to access that information. I mean, it's coming from the deepest part of themselves.
Now, there's going to be folks that are listening to us right now, and they're thinking, I would love to do one of these sessions,
Hmm.
but how do you do that deepening? So, could you
Yeah,
explain how exactly that works? How do you do that during a session?
great question. Okay, so the way this works is someone comes into my office and they're in the recliner. I'm sitting across from them and I'm talking to them. There's soft music. We've dimmed the lights and they're using their breathing to let themselves go into that deeper state. And as we go along, they'll start to drift deeper and deeper. There's a series of exercises leading them deeper down through my voice, through the suggestions that I'm giving them, through progressive relaxation. It's a form of progressive relaxation that we're doing with some other deepening techniques on the end. So that's why I say that they're participating
Okay.
because I can't do that for them, but they have to follow my guidance and they have to let go and they have to take a deep breath and just relax and go inward.
Now, Brent, we've heard all the stories about near-death experience, NDEs, and one of the fascinating aspects of NDE is the fact that there is so much consistency. Those that have experienced NDEs have come back and said they have experienced the soul rising above the body, maybe being at the ceiling, looking down, being able to float from room to room, then going to a tunnel, going to a light, and then being greeted by loved ones or a guide or so on. Do you have the same type of consistency in your LBL work?
Yes, and it's very consistent with what you described. Now, when the soul leaves the body at the death scene of the past life to move into the spirit world, often there's not a tunnel, but they're leaving the body, they're moving upwards and away from it, and they're moving towards the light. But it may be way off in the distance, but it's not necessarily a tunnel. Though some have described it as a tunnel. But they're moving towards that brilliant, bright light that guides them in. And when they get there, there is often a place of rest and rejuvenation once they're greeted by their guides, their loved ones. There could sometimes be a welcoming party first, and then after the welcoming party, then they may go to a place of rest and rejuvenation. And then once that happens, their guide will take them to various places to explore themes they're working on, to review the life, to meet with their council of elders, body selection, explore soul groups, why they're here. There's a deeper understanding of current life relationship dynamics through this experience. You're understanding why people are here, why they're in your lives, who they've been in other lives with you, but from the overview of more than one lifetime.
Does a soul automatically know what to do? In other words, they just get on autopilot and they go to the spirit world, or do you have to help them navigate to get there? I'm sure that's a question some of our listeners will have.
Generally, they leave the body and start moving into the spirit world. Now, I do have suggestions I can give them if they're not moving on their own, but often they're just guided in. Their guides are guiding them home. Their guides come to get them. Sometimes they'll describe points of light along the way, and then the brightest light of all, and that's often their guide. That's what I meant by them being guided home.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm facilitating just moving home, going to the place where you're from, and then sometimes I'm just allowing it to happen because it's flowing naturally.
Okay, so essentially, a soul does know how to get home.
Oh, yes.
I think because some
You
people
don't
ask that
oh,
question, like, well, does my soul know what to do once I die? It's like, yeah, I think it does.
yes, you don't get lost. You can find your way. Now, a few times there have been those experiences in the past life where the soul had something that was holding them there. So they're dead, they've left the body, but they're not going home. They've missed their window of opportunity to go home because something is keeping them there. Maybe it's a loved one that they want to stay and watch over. Maybe it's a promise that they made to always look out for someone or something. And that soul may hang around for a while, where some they pretty much leave the body and go right home. And I'll ask. The way I know this is because I'll ask. I'll say, do you stay with the body or do you head home? And they say, oh, no, I want to see who comes to my funeral. I want to see who shows up. And then other times they will say, oh, no, I'm done. I don't need to stay any longer. I left my body and I'm on the way.
Have you ever had a situation where the soul decided that they were going to remain earthbound, either by their own choice or by some divine intervention where, they don't go to the light, they essentially have to stay earthbound for some reason?
I have a few times, just a few. It's been a situation where that soul felt remorse or felt unworthy of being welcomed back home. So they pretty much blocked themselves from going home and they stayed earthbound. One was a soldier, and he and his unit were on a beach in Normandy. He was a German soldier, and he didn't realize that he was dead. And I know that sounds crazy, but he said, I'm sitting on a tree stump, and I'm waiting. And I'm hoping they're going to find me because I'm here, and I speak a different language, and all of my platoon are dead, and I need to sit here so that my troops can come find me. And then he started to realize he was dead. And the client is describing all of this. And then he left his body and kind of hung out for a while. He didn't feel worthy of going home because he had killed people. Now, that doesn't always happen because other times they can kill someone and then they get killed and they go right on back to the spirit world and meet the person that they killed and they shake hands and laugh about it. And talk about what the souls experienced by killing and being killed and playing both sides of that role. It's very different than in current life. Like if someone were to be killed now in current life, we experience that painfully, harshly. It's awful. But when you're experiencing it in a past life, you know that you've made it through because that soul has come back again in the body of the person sitting in your chair. So they're able to talk about it from a different space. And then when they go into the spirit world, there's a lot of humor there. So they'll rib with one another and tease, and the guides have some humor about them as well. And it's to get us to lighten up a bit because everything's so heavy down here on earth. They want us to lighten up when we go home.
So a soul then has emotional attachments that they carry with them, at least for some period of time after it leaves the body. In other words, some people believe that the soul just shakes it off and that's it. The life is over and the soul's back to being the soul without any of that emotional attachment from the previous life. But it sounds like that may not be the case. It could take a period of time or a while for the soul to reconcile and get things kind of, get those emotional aspects removed.
And that's the purpose of the healing and the restoration areas is to help release some of the density and the heaviness from the life just lived.
Right.
Some of the sadness and the pain. And then some of those things are carried into another lifetime to work them out from another perspective. Because there's an interconnectedness of all the souls, and there's a deeper understanding of our place in this world and our interconnectedness with the other souls around us. Through these sessions, we just have a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world.
Now, Bryn, when a soul starts its journey back home, what is the trip like for a typical soul going from the death scene into the spirit world? Where do they usually go first? Stops? That type of thing.
It's a good question. So they're greeted often by a guide or sometimes by a welcoming party of loved ones who are there first, and then the guides might come next, or the guide may come first and then lead them to a welcoming party. And I mean a party. They might be dressed up having a feast. They might be having a picnic. It might be it's some type of celebration to say, hey, you're back. Or good to see you again. And these are other souls that we have incarnated with. So it's loved ones that have already crossed over. It's also the souls of some of the ones that are still on the planet. Because there's always a piece of our soul that's left back in the spirit world, even when we're in a body. So you and I right now, there's a piece of us that's up there. So loved ones, living and deceased, all come together and greet and then have that celebration. And then the person will go to a place of rest and rejuvenation and clear the energies from that life. In my sessions, I usually ask the guide at that point if it's okay to take the client to one of those spaces to heal. Because I feel like, they've celebrated, they've acclimated, they're getting acclimated to being in the spirit world again. It's a good time to clear the energies before we do any further progress. And then we may go to a place of body selection to find out more about their body, why they chose that body, this life, these parents, that sort of thing. We may go to a library, a hall of records. Some people call this the Akashic records, and review some of that. We may explore soul groups and just explore more about some of the core people that we incarnate with. And, we play these different roles. So it's our core group that we agree to come down, and we're going to work together, or we're going to work against one another. We could work as supporting one another, or we can be antagonists to one another. But when we go back home to the spirit world, we're not antagonistic. We're laughing about the fact that we used to brawl and beat each other up in the past life, where we were bullies on the playground kind of thing. And there's no judgment. There's just no judgment up there. There's love and support, because they know how difficult it is to be here.
Now, your primary soulmate then is not always going to be your love. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're right. You're right. Now, some people have the idea that your soulmate is all lovey-dovey and it's always perfect. And if you could just find your soulmate, it would be perfect.
But it doesn't
Your
always
soul,
work that way.
no,
No.
your soulmate is that soul that was sparked at the same time as you. You've lived through many, many lifetimes together. You've had those lifetimes apart. You learn by being together. You learn by being apart. But they awaken something in you that no one else can do. There's something about that soul that awakens something in you, and there's a uniqueness to it. Now, sometimes a client will say, my husband wants to sit in with me on my session. Would that be okay? And I'll tell them no, because I don't want anyone else in the room. We're going to record it, and they can listen to the recording if the client wants. But I don't want the client to be editing themselves. And I also know some of the things that can come through these sessions are very profound, and there's nothing worse than having a husband sitting in the chair across from the wife that he loves, and hearing the wife say that her soulmate is her ex-husband or her ex-boyfriend, and she's okay with the fact that she's with the husband she's with now, but they're not okay with it. They can't unhear that.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be a bit problematic.
And if it was meant to be that she should have been with that person, she would be. Just because she discovers that her soulmate is someone else doesn't mean that it's meant for her to leave the life she has and go be with that person. Although in some cases, it is revealed that that's what they need to do and be with that person. But there's a misconception that you're always with your soulmate, and sometimes they show up for just a few minutes, and sometimes they show up for a lifetime.
Now, how does a spirit describe their presence, Bryn? Do they report back to you how they appear to themselves? You asked that question?
Yes, so often clients will describe themselves as balls of light with colors. When they're speaking of others, they may not see the facial features of their friend or loved one, but they know that essence. So it doesn't have a human shape. They can take on various shapes, but when they peel that back, at the core of that is a beautiful ball of light that has a glow to it, illuminated, various colors to it. It's not all one color. It's like hues of various shades throughout the essence of the being. They describe the guides the same way too.
I was going to ask you about soul colors. So, if you read the books, Michael
Mm-hmm.
Newton talks about the soul colors. Now, do you get clients being very inquisitive before the session saying, I want to know what my soul color is? And do you find that they do find that out, or does the guide or the elders kind of shut that down and say it's not important? What do you find with that?
No, they can definitely find that out. I find that most clients that come to me, that's not the main purpose for why they're coming. So I may ask, and if they have an interest in that, we'll explore more. But most clients, even though it's in the books, that's not the main focus of their session. But there have been a few that they really wanted to know what their colors were. So we found out more about it and what that meant. I know Michael Newton likes to talk about the colors, and he wants to let everyone know that it doesn't mean that one color means that you're better than someone else who has colors at a different end of the chart. It's just that as you've evolved and experienced many more lifetimes, you start to shift your energy and your color through all of those experiences. So you're not going to have the same colors as a beginner soul. But a beginner soul, beginner and advanced, it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It just means you've had more experiences coming back. You've been here more times. You're not new like you were the first couple of times you came here.
Do you get clients who ask you, I want to find out if I am an old soul or a young soul?
Yes. And it seems to me, I shouldn't categorize everyone, but it seems to me the ones that are expecting to be an old soul are surprised when they're not, or maybe haven't been here that many times, because the old souls seem to be surprised that they are when they're describing their colors, their violets and the purples and the blues.
That leads us to number of incarnations. Is that something that comes out during a session, the number of incarnations?
It can come out. I can't give you a specific number that everyone has experienced because the guides like to play around with those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ask a question of how many lifetimes has this client incarnated on Earth, the guide might say many more times that can be counted, or they might say a number. Someone in a past life book years ago, and I don't know who it was, but somewhere along the way, somebody gave this number. And so people have read those books and they always come in thinking everybody only has that many lifetimes. And I don't want to say the number, but clients are often told they have a different number of lifetimes than what they were expecting from that book. Not all beings have the same number of incarnations on this planet, and not all incarnations have been on Earth. So when you're asking about incarnations, it's important to be specific when asking the question, posing the question to the guide to clarify that for the client. Because are we talking about all of their incarnations, or are we talking about their incarnations on Earth?
Okay.
So you're going to get two different numbers.
Well, it would seem to me like things like soul color and number of incarnations, these are human curiosities that I would think that the spirit world probably doesn't put a lot of stock in. Am I right or wrong?
If they feel that the client is too hung up on those kinds of things, they will answer the question and tease them about it. It is telling about your past. It's important to know, but it shouldn't be the main focus of why you're here. There's so much more that you can explore there, and they want the client to open up and explore more than, am I advanced or not? They want them to explore relationships, the guidance that's there for them. Now, I think it's important that we mention too that the Council of Elders, the wise ones, the teachers, they give guidance, but we have the free will to choose the guidance or not. They don't tell us what to do. They will strongly suggest what we do, but they do not tell us we have to go do that. So we have the free will to follow their advice or not. That's where I think some people get confused because they think the guides tell us what to do. So what's the point in coming here and living when you've got a guide just telling you what to do every step of the way and we're like puppets? But that's what the guides are saying, is that the point of coming to Earth is to experience. We will help you, we will guide you, but it's your free will if you choose to follow that advice or not.
Now, Bryn, what's the difference for those that are listening that are not familiar with some of the terminology or some of the players? What's the difference between guides and then a council of elders?
So we have guides, like a main teacher, and we have more than one, but we'll have that main teacher, a couple of teachers that we work with for certain things. So, I have my main guide that I work with. And then when I'm doing my LBL and my past life sessions, there's another guide that I work with specifically with that to help me through those sessions. And then there's a council of elders. They're the planners. They're the ones that helped us plan out our lives when we plan to come here to be born. We can go before them and find out, how they feel that we're progressing at this stage of the game. It's a little different than that mentor guide that's with us one-on-one all the time than working with the Council of Elders.
So when a soul visits their council, what is that typically like? Are there a number of council members?
Well, there can be different number of council members. There are several. I guess it seems to fall into a range of maybe, I guess, 6 or 8. Clients will tell you different numbers of council members within that range. And the council members will trade out depending upon how you've progressed along the way. So maybe you have that council member that helps you with certain things. And once you've evolved beyond that point to need their assistance, they may leave and then another one come in that helps you with the next phase of what you're working with. So maybe if you're working on a theme of compassion, it may be time for another guide that comes in, another council member that comes in and sits on the council to help you with compassion and through some of those experiences.
Now, you mentioned something, Bryn, it just clicked in my head. Patterns of behavior, lessons. Sounds like it could take multiple lives to learn a particular lesson. Is that basically how it works?
Yes. And I'll ask the Council of Elders. So we do a life review. We review the past life, and often that's done with the council. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And also reviewing the life that's still ahead for the client. Often what will happen is if I ask, how many lifetimes has this person been working on this theme of humility? The council might say, for several lifetimes now, for 10 lifetimes. All right. Well, I may ask the council, so is this client going to complete that in their current life, or will there be future lifetimes where they'll be working on humility? A council may say, nope, they're going to finish it up this lifetime. Or they may say, there will be a couple of more lifetimes where they'll be working on this and then they'll move on to something else. And sometimes the council will say, there's an opportunity for the client to finish that in this lifetime. And if that happens, their next lifetime, they'll move into the next thing. See, there are possibilities, there are options. I hear a lot of times clients saying, I just don't want to take the wrong road. I don't want to be on the wrong path. I want to know how I'm doing. And what we're told from the spirit world, from our teachers and our elders, is that it's not about a right or a wrong road. It's about the experiences. And some choices will allow for a smoother road, but either road will get you there through the experience of having been on it.
Are they receptive to what they're hearing?
Yes, because they already know on some level. They may not have known on a conscious level, but they know at a soul level that this was going to happen. And sometimes they may laugh and say, please, I hope not. I hope I won't have to take this path or this other path. But they laugh knowing that it's part of the journey and it's part of what has been set up for themselves. It's something that they need to do.
Well, Bryn, we're running into the end of the show here. This has just been a fabulous discussion. We've covered a lot of ground. I have so many more questions, so we will have to have you back on the show.
Oh, I'd love to be back.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, something that we didn't cover, or if you want to talk about your practice or any of your books or how people can contact you, you can finish up the show any way you'd like.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I love talking about this. This is my favorite thing to do. And I just think it's important that people understand that having experienced the spirit world brings comfort, because it lets us know that we're not alone and that when our life on earth is over, it's not our final resting place, and that our soul continues on. And also that we're not here by accident. There's purpose to our lives. There are the interactions with the other souls. So I just wanted to mention that. As far as contacting me, you can reach me through my website, www.brynblankinship.com. You can find out more about some of the projects that I've been involved with. I've got some film projects, a couple of books that I've been fortunate enough to have been included in. Michael Newton's Memories of the Afterlife. I have chapter 3 in that book, When Children Teach from the Grave. And then Brian Weiss's book, Miracles Happen. I have a story called Embracing Equality in there. This is just exciting work to be doing. And now I teach hypnosis as well. I've been doing this for a few years now, but I teach hypnosis. have lots of students that I'm bringing through the ranks and bringing up along the way, and it's just really exciting to be doing that.
Now, you teach past life, right?
Yes, I teach past life regression. You have to be a certified hypnotherapist to do that. I also teach hypnosis, so I can start someone out on the track from the very beginning as a beginner hypnotherapist into the mastery certification of hypnosis into past life regression. And I'm also a lead instructor for the Newton Institute. So someone could continue on from the past life training and take Life Between Lives training through the Newton Institute if they chose to. It's just the most rewarding work to have a client have a moving experience that is so profound and shifts them into a nice, comforting space that gives them the strength to move forward after tremendous loss of a loved one or just some of the things that happen to us on earth, that they're able to pick up the pieces and move on with such strength. And that's why I love doing this kind of work. I just feel very fortunate that I get to. I'm glad that my soul signed up for this time around.
Now, you're working on a TV project too, and is there anything you want to say about that, or do you want to still keep that under wraps?
It's a TV pilot, and I can't really reveal too much right now, but it is a show about past life regression, and it's got some really great footage that we've already shot, and I really hope that it'll be up by the end of the year, but I can't say much more than that. Perhaps when you have me back on again, I'll be able to say more.
Okay, no, that's great. Well, when you're ready to talk about it, you come back on the show. You just call me. We'll have you on.
Okay, great.
We could spend a whole show talking about the TV show.
I know. It's been some fascinating things that have come through.
Well, Bryn, I want to thank you so much again. You're one of my favorite guests, and we will have you back. At the end of the show, I will again reiterate your contact information so people can get a hold of you and connect with you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on, and thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And that concludes my interview with Bryn Blankinship. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can reach Bryn at www.brynblankinship.com. And I want to thank everyone as always for listening, and thank you for your support and for visiting the blog, sageofquay.com. Please check out my album, Leaving Dystopia, at laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.